It's completely normal for adaptive or therapeutic horseback riding instructors to struggle with teaching anxious students. But when instructors employ the right methods within their lessons, whether it's mounted or on the ground, you can set your students up to build confidence and experience success. My name is Saber Popoli, and I'm the owner and founder of Footfalls and Footfalls, and I strive to provide quality education that equips and encourages fellow instructors like you to go out and provide the best lessons you can to all the ability students that you work with, and make sure that what you're providing is safe and professional. So let's talk about anxious students. Now, I'm going to give you 10 different things that you can incorporate into your lessons and your times that you're working with those students. And these 10 things are built off of the assumption that you are not teaching the student outside of what we would call their zone of proximal development. So you're not asking the student to do something that they cannot do either independently or can't do with some type of support as they're learning a skill. So they're not over-horsed, they're not over-tasked, or they're just not being taught in general. So that is kind of our base foundation that we need in order to talk about these things. So item number one that we are going to be talking about is, as an instructor, the first thing we need to do that's going to set us and our students up for success is that we need to be very proactive and be reading our students just like we would our horses, and be paying attention to their body language. And with their body language, that also comes tone of voice and their inflection, but we can get a really good read on our student and start to see things creeping up and becoming a problem, hopefully before it blows up into something big. And we can put some of these other pieces into play to make sure that we don't get a situation that's getting escalated and then we are really getting to where we're working with a very extremely anxious student where maybe we might have to dismount or call off our lesson time with that horse because it's no longer safe. So reading that body language, paying attention to their tone of voice and their inflection is something that we need to be doing from the start, okay? Number two is something that I've gotten to be a lot better with doing over the last few years as an instructor. And it's something that didn't really come normal to me because I thought sharing the struggles that I had encountered and normalizing human feelings, like feeling anxious or feeling frustrated, was a sign of weakness, and that, oh, I was the instructor and I should be perfect, and I can't let them know that I struggle with things because then why should I be teaching them? But point number two is normalize the feeling of anxiety and being anxious, because being anxious and experiencing moments of anxiety is a completely normal human feeling. And we want to let our students know that that's okay and it's possibly completely understandable. We've maybe encountered a situation where we have felt that way. Here's what I felt. Here's what I did to overcome it. Here's some tools that you can use and help them be able to work through those completely normal human feelings so that they can then go out and best partner and work with whatever horse they're with during that lesson. And what's really interesting too, and it's going to come into play in a couple of these other points that we're going to talk about, is that we need to normalize the different things that we feel, and that how we need to understand how we're feeling, and that different emotions can kind of feel the same way, and it depends on how our brains choose to interpret them. So our bodies are going to feel things like excitement and anxiety very similar. So they're going to have a very similar physical feeling, but how we interpret that in our brain and feel that as a human is going to vary a little bit. And so that's something that as humans we can normalize. So share stories of when you've encountered the same situation or feeling as an instructor. And again, we're not there to do therapy, we're not digging, but we can be human beings and have a conversation about how this is part of being a human and it's part of life, okay? All right, so the third thing is to realize how much impact our words and what flows from those words, the mindset, has on how we're feeling. So again, this is going back to kind of normalizing it, understanding that we're feeling these different things, but the label, the words that we're associating with those feelings can totally shift our mindset. So if we're out there riding around and we're going to be doing a new activity and this rider is saying, oh my gosh, okay, this is making me feel really nervous, I'm feeling anxious. Well, okay, so your heart rate's maybe going a little faster, our breathing's increased, maybe some butterflies in our stomach. Are we truly anxious, or is it maybe the same feelings of, oh, we're excited because we get to try something new, and oh, this is a challenge, and challenges are good, and doing hard things is good because that means that we're learning. So using the words that we use to describe when our students start to feel anxious or nervous or whatever they're feeling in those moments is going to help them create a certain mindset that can either help them or hold them back. So a really good example I have of this that I personally experienced is I had a student that was extremely anxious, and she had very negative words that she would associate with or use when she was asking for help. So this student would say, I'm gonna fall off. Can you please have the sidewalkers do a thigh hold? So those words were the negative feelings that she was associating with things at that time. Very valid for her to ask for those sidewalkers to do a thigh hold because she felt that certain way. So we're gonna recognize, yeah, totally valid, but let's shift how we say it to give ourselves a better mindset. So we shifted those words to where we framed it with the positive of, I want to feel safe, or I'm going to feel safe when the sidewalkers do a thigh hold. Or I would like to feel more secure, or I would like to feel more stable. Can the sidewalkers, or can you guys please do a thigh hold? Or can we please walk slower? That's fine. Advocating for yourself, but the words we're saying, that little shift of the negative feeling of, I feel like I'm gonna fall off, I feel like I'm unbalanced, I don't feel safe, to I want to feel stable, I want to feel balanced, I'm gonna feel more secure, can we do this? Made a world of difference. And I am that annoying instructor that I'll recognize that feeling, what they're saying, but have them rephrase it. And then after a time, they're gonna learn that that is what's expected of them out in lessons. And it's pretty cool to see some of the outcomes that happen even in regular life by learning that little trick of what we say really truly does impact our mindset and then how we feel in situations. All right, so the next thing that we can do to help our students that are feeling anxious or nervous or uncertain about things is to show them what we want them to do first, or show them the crazy thing that they might think we're asking them to do first, to let them see what it looks like, that it's achievable and that they can do it, and that they can wrap their brain around what's going on, because they might hear trot or they might hear riding by themselves or whatever it is and blow up this situation in their brain because they don't have the context for what it really looks like, and they might make that situation worse than it really is. And that's our fault as the instructor for not showing them exactly what we're asking them to do and talking them through that process. So showing our students is something that we need to do a whole lot more. And our phones, or you could use something else if you don't want to have your phone out in the arena, but our phones are something that is such an underutilized tool as instructors that we can take photos, videos, even send it to your students before a class. You kind of have to figure out, if that's actually going to work for them or if that's going to make them more anxious because you're not able to explain it to them. But showing them either beforehand and having a chat with them or during that lesson before you ask them to go do goes a really long way in helping to kind of ease those anxious feelings and let them know what they're going to be doing and what those expectations are. Because sometimes it's not the actual task that's creating that anxiety. It could just be that unknown, and are they going to fail? How much do they have to do? It's that unknown circumstances that is the root of kind of what they're struggling with, not going and actually trotting the horse or riding by themselves. That may not actually be the root of it. I'm one of those persons where it's the pieces of the unknown of like, well, what's expected of me? What do I have to do? Like, I'm a very detail-oriented person where that's what gets me anxious or frustrated or uncertain. And it's not necessarily the thing that I'm doing. It's all the things that surround it. So that's something that I found works really well, is showing our students before we ask them to go do it. Depending on, again, photo, video, you could even go demonstrate it as the instructor. And that's sometimes a really neat thing for our students to see, is that we can do it and lead by example. Maybe a mock rider, a demo rider, or a fellow student can lead and do it if they've done it before. So tons of different ways that we can show our students before we ask them to go ahead and do it. All right. So the next thing that we can do, I put CNR here on the board, are calming and relaxation techniques. So some of the very common ones that we can easily incorporate out in the arena or out in the barn are breathing activities. So you can do, like they call it 4x4s or box breathing, where you think about a box and you breathe in for 4 seconds, you hold it for 4 seconds, breathe out for a length of 4, and then you hold empty lungs for 4. You could also do that with your hand. My kids' school calls it like star breathing, and you like trace kind of like a star on your hand, and you breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. There's also different techniques where you hold it for different lengths of time. There's like a 7, 4, 3. So just figure out what works best for you. And leading by example, doing it with them is great, and getting them to take true deep breaths from down low, where we're getting that true deep release and getting that diaphragm active and not just shallow breathing, is huge. So breathing activities to help calm and relax. Another thing that you can do is called a grounding activity. So you can ask the student to tell you, you could say 2 things or 3 things, 2 things that they see, 2 things that they hear, 2 things that they feel, and maybe like 1 thing that they smell. That's been one, what do you smell? That's been a hard one to get more than 1 at, and that's usually where they get stumped. So that one I drop down to 1 usually. But what that does is that gets them out of their body and that little tunnel vision feeling that they're kind of in at that time, where they're centered on those anxious feelings and what's going on inside of them. So their rapid heart rate, their rapid breathing, and it gets them to pay attention to the environment around them. And that can really go a long way in kind of resetting their brain and getting them to calm down for a minute. And then we revisit whatever was going on that might have started that kind of that tunnel vision into really getting stuck in that anxious feeling at that time. So calming and relaxation activities like breathing and grounding. And again, not therapy by any means, but they're just tools and techniques that can make you a better horse person, because we need to control our breathing and control our emotions to be good leaders and good partners to the horses that we're working with. And that's something that we can teach our students, okay? All right, so the next one is something that is really overlooked, and it's something that as instructors, we should be reinforcing this good thing all the time, but we sometimes don't realize how closely tied it is to how we feel about that current situation. And point number 6 then, that thing that's overlooked a lot and how it impacts our feelings, is our posture. So when we are uncertain or when we are afraid or feel threatened, our bodies go into that fetal position. So we hunch over, we close in, we protect our vital organs in the front, all that squishy area, and we turtle up, legs come up, hunch over. So that is the opposite of good riding position, right? So good riding position, we want to ride in more of what we would call like a power posture. So opening up our chest, opening up our shoulders, standing tall, head up, we're looking out, and we're not closed in, fetaled in, turtled up. So good riding posture that we should be reinforcing as instructors actually goes a really long way in telling our brain we're safe and we're okay and we're not threatened, because we want to sit up out of that fetal position. We want to grow tall and open up and have good, strong body, be looking out where we're going, looking in front of us. And that's going to help tell our body that we are in a safe location, we're safe, we're okay, we don't need to be feeling that way, and we're going to take on that power posture of riding. And that's something where if we really hit a bump in our lesson, we might need to pause and whoa that horse. If we're really fetaled up, go hands on next to that rider. Maybe we're standing next to them. We do some breathing, some calming and relaxation techniques, and then we maybe revisit some warm-ups and some stretches. That's really going to emphasize going from that turtled, fetaled up position to more of a power posture position, so that we are telling our brain it's okay, and to hopefully kind of regulate those other body responses like that fast heart rate and our faster breathing, and help us calm down a little bit, okay? So posture. So good riding posture is not just good riding because it helps keep us balanced, but it has a good psychological outcome as well. So the next thing that we can use with our anxious rider is praise, but not just praise in general, honest and well-timed praise. So honest and well-timed, that means that we're not going to be praising every little single thing that they do. We want it to be honest, so that they actually are doing that thing. And it could be praising an attempt, it could be praising them making a small improvement, or it could be actually praising them fully accomplishing what we're asking them to do. There's different things that we can praise, but the honest piece comes into, are we praising the attempt, the progression, or the success of that thing? You don't just have to praise for full success and then lie about, oh, good job sitting up tall, when really we went from totally turtled over to kind of a little better, but we're still not in that full, good, strong riding position. That would be a not honest praise. So we want to have honest praise, and then also we want to make sure that we're not praising all the time, because how our brains work is that when we have honest praise that is sprinkled within the lesson, not all the time, it's actually it releases dopamine to our brains if it's actually done correctly. And that's one of those feel-good hormones for us. So that can help counteract some of those anxious feelings. So be careful with overpraising when we're working with those students that tend to get a little anxious. And I'm not saying don't praise it all, but it's that fine line of honest praise, and praising the attempts, praising the tries, bringing their attention to the things that they're trying to do. And then when they accomplish it or make a huge, jump in progress forward, or even a little jump in progress of, hey, you did better, like really big honest praise. And then let's get that hit of dopamine in and get the brain and the body working all together. So there's some pretty cool, just all the cool stuff that happens in our brain and the chemical responses that go along with teaching techniques of praise and breathing and good posture. Pretty cool. So Number 8 is going to be vary the level of difficulty that you are asking your student to do. And what this does is this goes back into what we call that zone of proximal development. And in the Intuitive Instructor Club, there's a whole presentation on the zone of proximal development, and then also what different pieces of our lesson can look like and how they relate to the different layers of the zone of proximal development. But just really quickly in a nutshell, because those are 2 totally separate presentations, much more in depth, so go check those out in the Intuitive Instructor Club if you want to learn more, which I highly suggest you do. It's a game changer for instructors. But varying the difficulty of what you're asking your students to do can be a really great way to kind of boost that confidence, get them to relax a little bit, have some wins, be able to maybe set them up for some moments where you can honestly praise them for something that they're doing well, or like little wins or tries. And this varying the difficulty looks like if they're struggling with something, maybe take a break from it. Recognize that, hey, if you're struggling with something, this is good. We're learning something new. Embrace that difficulty, lean into it. It's that mindset piece. But also then going back and putting them in the middle of that zone of learning of something that they can do well on their own without help. Set them up for success, remind them that they're fully capable, you believe in them, look at all the stuff that we can do, and then maybe go back out just a little bit into that zone of proximal development where it's something they can do, but they need some type of help, whether it's verbal support, physical support, a visual reminder, something like that. If we stay too long in that zone of proximal development and we don't kind of ebb in and out of things they can do without support and things that they can, sometimes that level of anxiety can kind of rise. So that, again, goes back to that first point of paying attention to our students' body language. And this is just something as an instructor that you can build your ability to read your student and go in and out of those zones of learning with your student in the moment and over time, and then layering in some of these different techniques to help them just be the most capable student and equestrian that they can be at that moment. So it takes practice, but varying difficulty is something that we can use as an instructor to reset, build confidence, and then build back up from there, either within that same lesson or maybe even within that the following lesson if we need to, kind of depending on how far things slipped. So 9 and 10, just like posture, are going to be things that you may not realize are tied to how our students feel and how confident they feel, whether they feel secure or whether those feelings of anxiety are starting to kind of creep up again, and setting them up for success. So number 9 is horse build. And how our horses build can impact our students, kind of just in a quick nutshell here, not going too deep into it. Again, in the Intuitive Instructor Club, a lot of content on this of our horses build, not only uphill, downhill, but also the width of the horse. And then also number 10 here that I haven't mentioned yet, more videos on that. But in a nutshell, our horses build. So is that horse a little bit wider for that student in relation to that student's pelvis, or is it more narrow in relation to that student's pelvis? Because the more narrow that horse feels, as it compares to the size of the student's pelvis, so, little kid versus adult, our width varies. And so a certain width of horse is going to feel different from a child to a teen to an adult. So that horse build can make us feel more secure. So like a little maybe average to wide horse. Or if we're on a more narrow horse for our pelvis, that could actually make us feel less secure physically, balance-wise, which is then going to trigger us to kind of fetal up, and then we're back in this whole posture situation. But it might be this continuous cycle because that horse's build that width of that horse is maybe just not great for the width of our pelvis at that time. That could maybe be something that we progress to later on with our students, of giving them the confidence of how to ride a horse that's maybe a bit more narrow for them. But that might be something that's a factor that maybe we don't tackle that yet, and we get other riding skills in place before we add that challenge in. Another factor with horse build that we need to consider, and this is something that I've really noticed the last few years and I really didn't pay attention to until another wonderful, very experienced instructor brought this up, and she created a presentation for this in the Intuitive Instructor Club. There's actually a whole series on this. But how horses that are built or kind of feel more uphill, so necks that are kind of right in front of you, and you might feel like the front of that horse is kind of up here, versus a horse that is downhill and leaning away from you and that neck is falling away. Sometimes those downhill horses, like your Western pleasure horse, just low carrying horses, maybe some of the even like maybe a halfie or something along the draft, sometimes they carry their necks down a little lower, versus a horse where that neck is kind of coming up under you and you feel a little bit more closer and more supported physically, and also maybe just visually, optical illusion. That is going to help that rider feel more secure. And a rider that tends to be anxious, they're probably going to sit a little bit more anterior tipped, so tipped forward. So if they already sit tipped forward and we put them on a downhill horse, that downhill horse is just going to make them tip forward even more. And that's going to increase that likelihood that they're in that anterior tip, and it's setting us up for that bad posture that is not that power posture. So putting that student that tends to be more anxious, probably gets more of that anterior perchy tippy seat on a little bit more uphill horse, is going to help them rock back in a little bit more neutral position, get them to open up, have more of a neutral seat, that power posture, and then we're going to have that positive cascade of our posture impacting how we feel, telling our brain that we're in a safe situation. And also, if you've got that visual piece there of like just that horse's neck being there, makes a lot of students that tend to kind of feel more anxious and insecure, they like that neck being there instead of it kind of like visually falling away from them. That's just kind of what I've experienced relating to the neck over the years, okay? So horse build, again, something that maybe we need to have that student on a horse that isn't that ideal build for them, but we need to recognize how much impact that horse's build, so width and also up or downhill, could have on that student and the other pieces that we've talked about here. All right, our last one here that we're going to talk about goes kind of hand in hand with our horse, but it's our tack. So the tack and the equipment that we put our student in, again, can set them up for success and put them in that zone of learning where they can do it with a little support or do it independently. Or we've maybe pushed them too far out to the very edge of their zone of proximal development, or even outside of it, to where even with that tack and the equipment that we're choosing to use right now with them, it's just too much for them. And then we're setting them up for poor posture. We're setting them up to be feeling things where we're really having to fight the words and the mindset that we have. And then we're just having difficulty across the board. So with the tack, some of the things that you can consider is that tack, is it slippery? Does it have a little bit of texture that kind of holds them in place? I found that slippery saddles, especially for students that have not only tendencies of getting anxious and not feeling comfortable or safe on the horse, they also tend to not do well with more slippery surfaces because they can't feel where their body is going, or they don't have the greatest posture and balance control. So slippery surfaces are something that we need to be aware of. Also, not putting our students in a well-fitted saddle, first to the horse, then to the student, and thinking that we need to kind of like throw them into the deep end and put them in bareback pad sets or have them ride without stirrups too soon or too frequently. Sometimes we're layering away that support of a well-made saddle and stirrups too soon. And yes, we might think, oh, we're trying to create that good posture, but relaxation needs to come first. And how we might accomplish that is we might need to keep stirrups in if we're riding in a saddle for a while, and then we layer them off, but we might be too far down that little anxiety track there, and leaving stirrups out is just going to make the situation way worse, where we might need to put them back in. Or we thought, oh no, if we put them in a bareback pad, it's going to make them build that solid seat and make them build that solid position, where really we're probably causing a lot of other issues, posture-wise, balance-wise, insecurity, and it's just all these factors that our students don't need to fight at that time. My whole stance on bareback pads is a totally separate video, but be careful layering in challenges and adjusting tack and equipment to increase the challenge and to lengthen and take away support too much too soon when you're working with students that struggle with anxiety and confidence, and not necessarily just like an actual diagnosis of anxiety, which that is completely different than just feeling anxious feelings, because feeling anxious or having moments of anxiety is a completely normal thing that we might experience in probably every student at some time, because it's a normal human emotion that we're going to be experiencing. True clinical anxiety disorders is to another level, and that requires a formal diagnosis from a medical professional. The things that we talked about here do work well with students that do actually have a formal diagnosis, but these also work well with students that just are experiencing the normal human emotion of anxiety or feeling anxious or insecure and all those kind of peripheral feelings that go with it. So let me know, what are some of the top tips that you took away from this presentation that are going to help you better work with students that are anxious or get feelings of anxiety during their lessons? Were there any of these tips that you already currently incorporate as an instructor? Did you learn any new ones? Comment below. I'd love to hear from you. And as always, please feel free to comment below or message me through email or Facebook Messenger with any other topics or questions that you have as an instructor and you want to learn about as it relates to adaptive, or also called therapeutic, horseback riding lessons, and just teaching horseback riding and equestrian activities in general, whether in the saddle or on the ground. Until next time, thank you so much. Make sure you like, follow, subscribe, share this content with other instructors to help give them tips and tools to make them a stronger instructor, and also to get this information out there and to let me know that stuff like this is something that you want to see more of.